Tyler Johnson stepped out of his car, the engine's hum fading into an unsettling silence that enveloped the old house. It loomed before him, an imposing structure with peeling paint and a sagging roof, its windows dark and unwelcoming. The air was thick with an eerie stillness, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to make the first move. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the unease that settled in the pit of his stomach. This was his new home, after all, at least for the next year. As he approached the front door, the wooden steps creaked beneath his weight, adding to his discomfort. He knocked, and after a moment, the door swung open to reveal Lily, a bright smile lighting up her face. Her vibrant red hair framed her freckled cheeks, and her warm, welcoming demeanor was a stark contrast to the house's gloomy exterior. "Hey, you must be Tyler. Welcome," she exclaimed, stepping aside to let him in. "Thanks, Lily," Tyler replied, forcing a smile as he stepped into the dimly lit hallway. The interior was just as old as the outside, with faded wallpaper and a musty smell that lingered in the air. He could barely make out the outlines of his new roommates, the tall, athletic Marcus and the quiet, bookish Sarah, who were both lounging in the living room, engrossed in a video game. "Tyler, nice to meet you, man," Marcus called out, glancing over his shoulder. His voice boomed with enthusiasm, and he extended a hand for a firm shake. "Yeah, good to have you here," Sarah added, looking up from her spot on the couch. She pushed her glasses up her nose, her eyes sparkling with mild curiosity. As they settled into casual conversation, Tyler found himself relaxing, but a shadow of doubt still lingered in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that the house had secrets hidden within its walls. As evening fell, the atmosphere shifted. The playful banter of his roommates faded, replaced by an unsettling quiet. Later that night, as Tyler lay in his new room, he tried to dismiss the strange noises that began to echo through the house. At first it was just the sound of old pipes groaning, but soon it morphed into something more unsettling, a soft thumping, as if something heavy was being dragged across the floor. He turned in bed, pulling the covers tighter around him, questioning whether he had made the right choice in moving in. "Just the house settling," he muttered to himself, though he wasn't convinced. The thumping continued, growing louder, more insistent, and he found it difficult to ignore. It was coming from the basement. He was sure of it. The one place his roommates had warned him about, insisting it was off limits. "Hey guys," he called out, attempting to keep his voice steady as he stepped into the living room, where Lily, Marcus, and Sarah were still awake, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of the television. "What's going on in the basement?" Lily's expression shifted, her smile faltering. "Oh, you know, just old stuff. Best not to go down there." "Yeah," Marcus chimed in, his tone light but his eyes betraying a hint of seriousness. "It's really not worth your time. Trust us." "Just some old junk," Sarah added softly, her gaze dropping to her lap. "Right," Tyler said, a frown creasing his brow. The vague responses only fueled his curiosity. As the night wore on, he found it increasingly difficult to shake the feeling that something was amiss. The noises persisted, and he could feel an inexplicable pull toward the basement, a dark lure that gnawed at his mind. Lying in the dark, heart racing, Tyler wrestled with his thoughts. The combination of his roommate's odd behavior and the strange sounds from below created a perfect storm of anxiety. Was he really going to let this place intimidate him? He had always been one to confront his fears head-on, but now, the weight of the house's atmosphere pressed down on him, suffocating his resolve. "Tomorrow," he whispered to himself, "I'll figure this out." The words barely comforted him as he drifted into a restless sleep, the echo of the thumping still reverberating in his mind. Little did he know the secrets of the house were waiting, hidden in the shadows, ready to ensnare him in their dark embrace. Tyler woke to the sound of birds chirping outside his window, the morning light spilling into his room like a soft embrace. He rubbed his eyes, trying to shake off the remnants of a restless night filled with echoes of the basement's ominous noises. The peculiar sounds had haunted him, weaving through his dreams and leaving him with a palpable sense of dread. Determined to confront his roommates about the unsettling occurrences, he threw on a t-shirt and headed to the kitchen. Lily was already there, her back turned as she poured herself a cup of coffee. The aroma filled the air, mingling with the scent of freshly toasted bread. Tyler cleared his throat, unsure of how to approach the conversation without sounding overly paranoid. "Hey, Lily," he began, trying to keep his tone casual. "Did you hear those noises last night? Coming from the basement?" She paused, the coffee mug halfway to her lips. Without turning around, she replied, "Oh, you know how old houses are. They creak and groan. It's just the pipes." Tyler frowned, sensing the dismissiveness in her tone. But it sounded like something else, almost like whispers. Lily finally turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Trust me, it's nothing to worry about. Just let it go, okay?" "Let it go?" Tyler echoed, frustration creeping into his voice. "How can I just let it go? It feels like there's something down there." "Tyler," she said, her voice firm but gentle. "We've all heard things. It's best not to dwell on it." He opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his tongue. The way she spoke made it clear that this was a topic she was unwilling to discuss further. With a sigh, he decided to drop it for now. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more beneath the surface, an unspoken history that his roommates were hiding. After breakfast, Tyler wandered through the house, his curiosity piqued. The walls were adorned with faded photographs and odd trinkets, remnants of lives lived long before his arrival. As he explored, he felt a strange connection to the place, as if the house itself was beckoning him. In the corner of the living room, an old, dusty book caught his attention. He picked it up, wiping off the layers of dust to reveal its title, Chronicles of the Lost. Intrigued, he flipped through the pages, revealing faded accounts of missing persons from the area. Each story was accompanied by grainy photographs, faces of people who had vanished without a trace. "Hey, Tyler, you find something interesting?" Marcus's voice interrupted his thoughts as he entered the room, a playful smirk on his face. "Just this old book," Tyler replied, holding it up for Marcus to see. "It has stories about people who went missing around here." Marcus leaned closer, feigning interest. "Yeah, that stuff is all urban legend. You know, spooky tales to scare newcomers. Don't let it get to your head." Tyler's heart raced. But what if it's not just a legend? What if there's a reason they disappeared? "Relax, man," Marcus laughed, clapping him on the back. "You're reading too much into it. It's just an old house with some creepy stories, nothing to worry about." As Marcus walked away, Tyler was left with a nagging sense of unease. The dismissive attitudes of his roommates only fueled his determination to uncover the truth. That night, as darkness enveloped the house, the unsettling noises returned, louder and more insistent than before. Tyler lay in bed, his heart pounding in his chest. The whispers seemed to seep through the walls, wrapping around him like a cold shroud. Unable to bear it any longer, he made a decision. He would confront his fears and explore the basement. The pull toward its darkness was undeniable, an inexplicable urge that seemed to call out to him. As he lay there, contemplating the shadows that danced on the ceiling, he felt a mixture of fear and exhilaration. Tyler knew that deep down, he was not just curious. He was drawn to the secrets hidden beneath the surface, ready to uncover what lay in the depths of the house. Tyler's heart pounded in his chest as he stood before the basement door, the soft glow of his flashlight cutting through the oppressive darkness. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and mildew, and the eerie silence made him acutely aware of every creak and groan of the old house. He glanced over his shoulder, half expecting to see one of his roommates lurking in the shadows, but the hallway remained empty, the faint light from the upstairs casting long, distorted shadows on the walls. Drawing a deep breath, he pushed the door open slowly, its rusty hinges protesting with a ghostly squeal. He descended the narrow stairs, the wooden steps creaking beneath his weight, each sound echoing ominously in the stillness. As he reached the bottom, he felt the cool air of the basement wrap around him like a shroud, sending a chill down his spine. The basement was dimly lit, cluttered with remnants of the past, old furniture draped in dust-laden sheets, boxes stacked haphazardly in corners, and the smell of decay mingling with something far more sinister. Tyler's eyes were drawn to a door at the far end of the room, slightly ajar. It seemed to beckon him, an invitation into the unknown. He approached cautiously, each step heavy with apprehension. Pushing the door open wider, he stepped into the hidden room, and the sight that greeted him sent a jolt of fear coursing through his veins. The space was filled with yellowed photographs pinned to the walls, their subjects long gone, but their eyes staring back at him, haunting and hollow. Newspaper clippings littered the floor, detailing disappearances that had plagued the town for decades, each article more chilling than the last. Tyler's breath quickened as he scanned the room, piecing together the fragments of a dark history. "What happened here?" he murmured to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. The photographs captured faces of those who had vanished, their smiles frozen in time, a stark contrast to the tragedy that had befallen them. He felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him, the weight of their lost lives pressing down on him like a heavy fog. Suddenly, a noise behind him broke the stillness, a soft scuffing sound, like someone shifting their weight. Tyler spun around, heart racing, only to find Lily standing in the doorway, her face pale and drawn. "Tyler, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice a mixture of fear and urgency. I had to see for myself," he stammered, his eyes darting back to the photographs. "These people, they're connected to the house, aren't they? You have to tell me what's going on." Lily stepped inside, glancing nervously over her shoulder as if expecting someone to follow. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her tone low but insistent. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. This place, it's not safe." "Then why didn't you warn me? Why didn't you tell me about the basement?" Tyler's frustration bubbled to the surface, unable to hide his rising panic. "You all acted like it was just some silly superstition." "Because it's not a joke," Lily replied, her voice trembling. "We've all felt it. The house has a way of getting into your head. You can't just ignore it." She took a step closer, her eyes pleading. "Please, Tyler, we need to leave, now." But Tyler's curiosity had morphed into an obsession. "I can't just walk away from this," he insisted, shaking his head. "There's something here, something important. I have to know what happened to these people." Lily's expression hardened, and she shook her head slowly. "You don't know what you're asking for. I've seen what happens to those who dig too deep. It's not just about the house, it's about what it wants." Her voice dropped to a whisper, filled with a fear that sent shivers down his spine. "You're putting yourself in danger." "Danger? Or the truth?" Tyler shot back, his determination flaring. "I can't just pretend everything's fine. I need answers." Before Lily could respond, a loud crash echoed from above, shaking the very foundations of the house. They both froze, eyes wide with fear. Tyler's heart raced as he exchanged a glance with Lily, realizing that whatever was lurking in the shadows of the house was growing restless, and they were running out of time. "Come on," Lily urged, her voice urgent as she grabbed his arm. "We need to get out of here." As they hurried toward the stairs, the oppressive atmosphere of the basement seemed to thicken, as if the house itself were trying to keep them inside. Tyler felt the weight of the photographs and the stories they told pressing down on him, a reminder that some secrets were better left buried. Yet, as they ascended the stairs, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, as if the house was already claiming him as part of its dark legacy. Tyler's heart raced as he stood frozen in the hidden room, the walls lined with yellowing photographs and dark newspaper clippings that whispered secrets of the past. The eerie silence was shattered by the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind him. He turned sharply, his breath catching in his throat as he found Lily standing at the threshold, her face pale and drawn. "Tyler, you need to leave this place, now," she urged, her voice quivering with urgency. "What do you mean? Why? What's going on?" Tyler's confusion deepened, mixing with a growing sense of dread. Lily stepped further into the room, her eyes darting nervously around as if the very walls listened. "You don't understand. We've all felt it. There's something wrong with this house. It changes you. You have to trust me." Tyler shook his head, disbelief etched across his features. "Changes us? What do you mean? I just found all of this." He gestured to the photographs, the clippings, the evidence of disappearances that seemed to stretch back decades. "This is real, Lily. People have gone missing." Her expression darkened, and she lowered her voice to a whisper. "They don't want us to know. Marcus and Sarah. They've been here longer than you think. They've seen things we can't talk about." The tension in the air thickened. Tyler felt a cold sweat trickle down his spine. "What have they seen? What do you know?" Lily hesitated, her gaze flickering to the door as if she expected someone to come barging in. "We need to get out of here. I'll explain upstairs." She turned and motioned for him to follow, the urgency in her tone leaving no room for argument. As they ascended the creaking staircase, Tyler's mind raced with questions. Why hadn't Lily mentioned any of this before? What did she mean by, "They don't want us to know"? He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being drawn deeper into a web of secrets. When they reached the living room, Tyler confronted Marcus and Sarah, who lounged on the couch, seemingly unfazed by the tension in the air. "I found something in the basement," he started, his voice steady but laced with frustration. "Why didn't you tell me about it?" Marcus raised an eyebrow, a smirk playing at the corners of his lips. "What, the basement? It's just an old storage area. You're making a big deal out of nothing, Tyler." "Nothing?" Tyler shot back, his voice rising. "There are photographs of missing people down there. This house, it's connected to all of it." Sarah exchanged a glance with Marcus, and the casual demeanor faded from her face. "You shouldn't have gone down there. It's not safe," she said, her tone shifting to one of warning. "What are you talking about? Why is it not safe?" Tyler demanded, feeling the weight of their dismissals crushing his resolve. "Tyler, it's just a joke. We're messing with you," Marcus replied, laughter lacing his words as if to brush off the gravity of the situation. "You're overreacting. Just chill out." Lily stepped forward, her voice rising above the banter. "It's not a joke. You don't understand the history of this place. It's not just an old house. It's something more." "More?" Marcus scoffed, crossing his arms. "You're sounding paranoid, Lily. It's just an old building with some creepy stories. Get over it." Tyler felt a chill creep up his spine as he watched the exchange, sensing an underlying tension that was becoming impossible to ignore. "You all know more than you're letting on," he accused. "What are you hiding?" But Marcus waved his hand dismissively, and Sarah added, "You're just scaring yourself. The house can't hurt you if you don't let it." Tyler's frustration boiled over. "That's easy for you to say. You've been here longer. You're comfortable with whatever this place is hiding. I'm the new guy, and I'm the one who's supposed to be scared." As he retreated to his room that night, the unsettling feeling of being watched wrapped around him like a suffocating shroud. He lay in bed, unable to close his eyes, the night stretching on with whispers echoing in his mind. He strained to listen, hoping to catch a glimpse of the truth that his roommates were clearly hiding. Through the thin walls, he heard hushed voices, their tones conspiratorial. He couldn't make out the words, but the urgency in their whispers sent a shiver down his spine. Marcus and Sarah were discussing something they did not want him to hear. Tyler's heart raced as he pressed his ear against the wall, trying to catch even a fragment of their conversation. "We can't let him find out," one voice said, the words barely audible. "He's too curious for his own good." Tyler's breath hitched in his throat. What were they planning? What was so important that they were willing to keep him in the dark? The weight of their secrets pressed down on him, and he knew he had to find out the truth, whatever it might cost him. Tyler sat at the small desk in his room, the glow of his laptop illuminating his furrowed brow as he scoured the internet for any information he could find about the house. The creaking floorboards echoed the tension in his mind, and the faint sounds from the basement felt like a distant heartbeat, urging him to uncover the truth. After hours of research, he stumbled upon a name, Francis Larkins, a man notorious for his connection to a series of disappearances that haunted the town decades ago. With determination coursing through him, Tyler decided it was time to confront his roommates again. He found Marcus and Sarah lounging in the living room, their laughter ringing hollow in the dim light. Lily was absent, likely hiding in her room after their last encounter. "Hey guys," Tyler began, his voice steady despite the anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. "I've been looking into the history of this house, and I found something unsettling. Marcus looked up, his brow arched in mock curiosity. "What's that, Sherlock? Did you find the ghost of the previous owner?" Tyler clenched his jaw, ignoring the sarcasm. "No, seriously, this house used to belong to Francis Larkins. He was linked to a bunch of disappearances, people who just vanished without a trace. How could you guys not mention this?" Sarah's expression shifted, and for a brief moment, Tyler thought he saw fear flicker across her features. "That's just an urban legend," she said, her voice lacking conviction. "People love to make up stories about old houses. It's all nonsense." "Is it?" Tyler pressed, his frustration mounting. "I found clippings about it. There's a pattern. The last person who disappeared was a student who lived here, just like me." Marcus shrugged, his nonchalance infuriating. "Look, Tyler, we don't know what happened to those people. It's in the past. Why are you digging up old ghosts?" "Because it matters," Tyler snapped, the weight of his discovery pressing down on him. "You all know more than you're letting on. Why won't you just tell me the truth?" Silence fell over the room, thick and suffocating. Sarah exchanged a glance with Marcus, and Tyler could feel the tension crackling in the air. "We just don't want you to get hurt, okay?" Sarah finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This house isn't what it seems." "Then why are you still here?" Tyler questioned, his heart racing. "If it's so dangerous, why haven't you left?" "Because we can't," Marcus said, a hint of seriousness creeping into his tone. "We've been affected. The house has a way of keeping you here, pulling you in. You're not the first to come looking for answers, and you won't be the last." Tyler felt a cold chill run down his spine. "What do you mean by that?" Before either of them could respond, the front door creaked open, and Lily stepped inside, her face pale and drawn. "What's going on?" she asked, her eyes darting between the three of them. "Tyler found out about Larkins," Marcus said, his voice low. "We were just telling him that he needs to drop it," Lily interrupted, her tone urgent. "You don't understand what you're getting into, Tyler. This house, it's not just a building. It's alive in a way. It feeds on fear and curiosity." "Then why do you stay?" Tyler demanded, his voice rising. "Why do you let it control you?" "Because we're trapped," Sarah blurted out, her composure cracking. "We can't leave. If we do, something worse happens. We've seen it happen to others." Tyler's mind raced, his heart pounding as the pieces began to fit together. "You're scared of it, aren't you? You've been living in its shadow." Lily stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "Please, Tyler, we're trying to protect you. You don't want to know what happens to the ones who dig too deep." Determined to uncover the truth, Tyler decided to set a trap. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, he carefully laid out the evidence he had gathered on the dining table. The newspaper clippings, the photographs, the history of the house. He made sure to leave the light on, hoping to catch his roommates off guard as they sneaked a look. As he waited in the darkness of his room, the weight of the house's secrets pressed against him. Tyler felt a mixture of dread and anticipation, knowing he was on the brink of exposing something that could change everything. Would they admit the truth, or would he find himself deeper in their web of lies? He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that the house itself was aware of his intentions, and that there was no escaping its grasp. Tyler paced his small room, the weight of the house's secrets pressing down on him like a heavy fog. He had spent hours gathering evidence, piecing together the dark history of the place and the unsettling behavior of his roommates. Each photograph and newspaper clipping he had discovered in the basement told a story of loss, and he was determined to confront Marcus, Lily, and Sarah, hoping to finally unravel their web of lies. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the walls, Tyler felt a surge of adrenaline. He had decided to confront them in the living room, where he could corner them and demand the truth. He gathered the newspaper clippings and several photographs he had collected, placing them on a table in front of the couch, then took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he hoped would be a revelation. When Marcus and Sarah entered the room, laughter and lightness filled the air, a stark contrast to the tension that gripped Tyler. "What's going on, man?" Marcus asked, his brow furrowed in confusion as he noticed the scattered papers. "You look like you just saw a ghost." "More like I've been living with one." Tyler retorted, his voice strong but laced with frustration. I know about the disappearances. I know about the basement. You can't keep lying to me. Lily stepped in, her expression shifting from amusement to concern. Tyler, we told you the basement is off limits for a reason. You're digging into things that are better left alone. Better left alone? Tyler scoffed, waving a hand at the photographs. These people were real. This house is connected to their disappearances, and you all are acting like I'm the crazy one for wanting to know the truth. Maybe you should just drop it, Sarah said quietly, her eyes darting away as if she couldn't bear to look at him. Some things are meant to stay buried. Tyler felt his heart race. The fear in their eyes fueled his anger. No, I won't let this go. You've been here long enough to know what's going on. You need to tell me the truth or I swear I'll... Before he could finish his sentence, the atmosphere shifted. The air thickened, crackling with an energy Tyler couldn't explain. He turned sharply as he heard a creaking sound from the basement, a low moan that seemed to echo through the house. What was that? He asked, his voice trembling. Nothing, Marcus replied, but the tightness in his jaw betrayed him. It's just the house settling. Tyler took a step back, his instincts screaming at him to flee. You're hiding something, he insisted, backing away from the table. I can feel it. This house, it's not just old, it's alive. Suddenly, Lily stepped forward, her expression serious. Tyler, please. You don't understand. We've been chosen. Chosen? Tyler repeated, confusion and fear mingling in his gut. Chosen by the house, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper, to serve its needs. The disappearances, they were sacrifices. We've been trying to survive, to appease something that can't be ignored. Just then, the door to the basement creaked open, revealing a pitch-black void that seemed to beckon him. Tyler's instincts kicked in, and he turned to run, but Marcus was suddenly in front of him, blocking his path. You can't leave, he said, his voice low and threatening. You're part of this now. Panic surged through Tyler as he backed away, his heart racing. You're all insane. I won't let you do this to me. As he darted towards the front door, Sarah lunged at him, grabbing his arm with surprising strength. It's too late, Tyler. You can't escape what you've already walked into. Tyler wrestled free, but the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The house had chosen him as its next victim. He stumbled backward and his back hit the wall, the cold surface sending a shiver down his spine. He looked around frantically for an escape, but Marcus and Lily were closing in. Welcome to the family, Marcus sneered, a predatory glint in his eyes. In that moment, Tyler knew he had been lured into a trap of his own making. The house had ensnared him, and as he felt hands grasping at him, dragging him back toward the basement, he understood the truth. He was no longer an outsider. He was the next name to be added to the wall of missing persons hidden in the depths of the house. The darkness engulfed him, and as he was pulled into the abyss, he caught one last glimpse of the world above, a world that would never know his fate. Jessica Martin stood in the vast, sunlit living room of her new apartment, absorbing the vibrant energy of the bustling city that sprawled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. The gleam of the polished hardwood floors reflected her excitement as she turned to face her roommates, Amy and Rachel, who had been nothing but welcoming since her arrival. "Can you believe this place?" Jessica exclaimed, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "I feel like I'm living in a dream." Amy, a petite woman with an infectious smile, chuckled as she set down a box of pizza on the dining table. "Welcome to the dream, Jess. We're thrilled to have you here. Just wait until you see the nightlife. It's incredible." Rachel, taller and more reserved, nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it's a fantastic neighborhood. Plenty of coffee shops and parks nearby. You'll love it." Jessica smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest at the camaraderie. She had moved to the city in search of a fresh start and hoped this apartment would be the sanctuary she longed for. The three of them settled around the table. Pizza boxes opened, steam rising from the cheesy slices. Laughter filled the air as they shared stories about their lives, their hopes, and their dreams. But as the evening wore on, Jessica's demeanor began to shift. While Amy and Rachel animatedly recounted their college adventures, Jessica often stared off into the distance, her smile fading. "What about you, Jess?" Amy asked, noticing her distant gaze. "What was college like for you?" "Oh, it was fine," Jessica replied, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she were caught in a reverie. "I studied a lot, didn't really have time for fun." Rachel tilted her head, intrigued. "What did you study?" "Psychology," Jessica said, her tone suddenly more vibrant. "I've always been fascinated by the mind, how people think and behave." "That's awesome," Amy replied, her enthusiasm rekindled. "You can help us understand our weird dreams." Jessica chuckled softly, but there was a flicker of something in her eyes, a shadow that passed too quickly for Amy to decipher. As they finished dinner, the conversation flowed easily, but Jessica's mind seemed elsewhere. After cleaning up, they all headed to their respective rooms. Amy settled into bed, but sleep eluded her. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the city outside, the distant honking of cars and the faint hum of nightlife. Hours later, a soft sound broke the stillness of the night. Amy sat up, straining to hear. There it was again, a faint whisper drifting through the hallway. It was coming from Jessica's room. A chill ran down Amy's spine. What is she doing? Amy thought, feeling a mix of curiosity and unease. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed, the cool wood floor sending a shiver up her spine. She tiptoed to the door, pressing her ear against it, straining to catch the words. "It will be perfect. Soon." Jessica's voice was barely audible, laced with an intensity that made Amy's heart race. The whispering continued, interspersed with soft, almost melodic humming. Amy's mind raced with questions. Was Jessica talking to someone? Was she on the phone? Or was she truly alone? Feeling an inexplicable pull, Amy quietly opened her bedroom door, peering into the dimly lit hallway. The shadows danced along the walls and the whispering grew fainter, replaced by an eerie silence that hung in the air. Just then, a floorboard creaked under her foot, snapping her back to reality. Heart pounding, she retreated back into her room, breathless. I need to talk to Rachel about this, she decided, her instincts screaming that something was off. With that unsettling thought in her mind, Amy lay back down, her eyes wide open, staring into the darkness. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was hidden beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect apartment. As the city continued to pulse with life outside, Amy drifted into a restless sleep, unaware that her curiosity would soon unravel a chilling truth that lurked just beyond the shadows of their home. As dawn broke over the city, the sunlight streamed through the large windows of the upscale apartment, illuminating the spacious kitchen where Amy stood, preparing breakfast. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the scent of sizzling bacon. She hummed softly to herself, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in her stomach since Jessica had moved in. The previous night's whispers played on a loop in her mind, each repetition sending a shiver down her spine. Just as Amy was about to pour herself a cup of coffee, she heard the sound of Jessica's door creaking open. She turned to see her new roommate emerge, her hair disheveled and eyes wide with an intensity that made Amy's heart race. Jessica was rearranging her belongings, her movements quick and erratic, a stark contrast to the calm atmosphere Amy had tried to create. "Good morning, Jessica," Amy said cheerfully, hoping to bridge the distance that had formed between them. "I made breakfast if you're hungry." Jessica's gaze flicked to Amy, but there was an unusual heaviness in her expression. "Oh, thanks, Amy. I'm not really hungry right now," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. She quickly moved to the living room, leaving Amy puzzled. As the morning progressed, Amy couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica was hiding something. She noticed that Jessica kept her bedroom door locked and seemed to be constantly rearranging her things, as if she were preparing for an impending storm. "What's going on?" Amy muttered to herself, stirring the scrambled eggs with a sense of foreboding. Later that evening, after a long day at work, Amy tried to relax on the couch with a book. Yet, her focus was shattered by the faint sound of Jessica's voice drifting through the hallway. Leaning closer, she strained to hear the words, but they were muffled, laced with a strange urgency. It sounded almost like a conversation, but with no one else present. "What are you doing?" Amy whispered to herself, a knot tightening in her chest. She set her book down and tiptoed closer to Jessica's door, her heart pounding in her ears. "Jessica," she called out, hoping to break the tension. There was no response, just the faint rustling of fabric and the continued low murmur of Jessica's voice. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. She was torn between curiosity and fear, the unease growing heavier. Finally, gathering her courage, she knocked softly on the door. "Jess? Are you okay in there?" Still no answer. With each passing night, Amy's concern deepened. She decided to confide in Rachel, hoping that together they could figure out what was happening. The following evening, as they sat on the couch sharing a bottle of wine, Amy broached the subject. "Rachel, have you noticed anything strange about Jessica?" she asked, her voice low. Rachel raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of her wine before responding. "Strange? Like what?" Rachel replied, a hint of amusement in her tone. "I don't know. She talks to herself sometimes, and she keeps her door locked all the time. It feels off," Amy explained, her eyes darting toward Jessica's closed door. Rachel shrugged, a dismissive smile appearing on her lips. "Maybe she's just a little eccentric. Not everyone is as social as we are. Give her some time. She'll come around." Amy felt a wave of frustration wash over her. But what if it's more than that? What if she's hiding something? Like what? A secret life? "Come on, Amy. You're reading too much into this," Rachel laughed lightly, shaking her head. "She's probably just adjusting to living with us. You know how it is." But Amy couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The whispers continued, and the more time passed, the more isolated Jessica seemed. Each night, the mystery deepened, wrapping around Amy like a suffocating blanket. She tried to convince herself that Rachel was right, but the gnawing suspicion lingered, refusing to let go. As the days turned into weeks, Amy's unease morphed into a relentless anxiety that began to affect her sleep and work. She was always on edge, the whispers echoing in her mind, while Jessica's erratic behavior became a source of torment. The tension in the apartment grew palpable, an invisible force that left Amy feeling trapped within its confines. Little did she know that the darkness lurking just beyond the threshold was about to unravel everything she thought she knew. Amy awoke to an unsettling stillness that blanketed the apartment. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, casting soft patterns on the walls. But something felt off. She turned to Rachel's bed, expecting to see her friend still nestled under the covers, but the sheets were perfectly made, the pillow untouched. A wave of unease washed over her as she swung her legs over the side of her bed, her heart racing with a nagging feeling that something was amiss. "Rachel?" she called out, her voice wavering slightly. There was no response. The silence felt oppressive, wrapping around her like a heavy fog. She glanced at the clock on the wall. It was well past the time they usually started their day. Amy pushed herself up, her mind racing. Where could Rachel be? She padded down the hallway to the kitchen, her footsteps echoing in the quiet. The apartment felt empty, devoid of the usual morning chatter and laughter. As she entered the kitchen, a cold chill ran down her spine when she noticed Rachel's phone lying on the counter, its screen cracked and dark. Amy's breath caught in her throat as she picked it up, her fingers trembling. "Rachel!" she called again, louder this time. Still the silence lingered, thick and suffocating. Amy's anxiety swelled as she thought of all the strange behaviors she had noticed in the past few days. She recalled Jessica's whispers at night, her secretive glances, and the way she often locked her door, as if hiding something sinister. Maybe she just went out for a run, Amy muttered to herself, trying to shake off the worst of her fears. But deep down she sensed that something was terribly wrong. She rushed to Rachel's room, pushing the door open without knocking. The room was just as Rachel had left it, but the absence of her friend weighed heavily in the air. Amy's heart raced as she scanned the room, looking for any sign of where Rachel had gone. As she stepped back into the hallway, her mind raced with possibilities. What if Jessica knew something? What if she had something to do with Rachel's disappearance? Amy felt a surge of determination rush through her. She couldn't just sit idly by, she needed answers. "Hey, Jess?" Amy called out, hoping to find Jessica in the common area. But there was no answer. The apartment felt more like a tomb than a home, and Amy's nerves began to fray. She glanced down the hallway toward Jessica's room, the door firmly shut. It was always locked, and Amy had never dared to pry. But now, with Rachel missing, the thought of Jessica's hidden life gnawed at her. "Come on, Amy, you can do this," she whispered to herself, her heart pounding in her chest. She approached Jessica's door, feeling the coolness of the doorknob beneath her fingers. She hesitated for a moment, doubt creeping in. What if she was wrong? What if she was about to invade Jessica's privacy for no reason? But the fear of what could have happened to Rachel pushed her forward. After a few moments of hesitation, she twisted the doorknob, only to find it locked as expected. A sense of urgency washed over her. She glanced around, ensuring no one was watching, and then she leaned in closer to the door, straining to hear anything from within. Just then, she caught a faint sound, a soft, rhythmic whispering that chilled her to the bone. "Jessica?" she called, her voice barely above a whisper. The whispering cut off abruptly, and Amy's heart raced as she pressed her ear against the door. She could hear Jessica's voice, but it was muffled, as if she was speaking to someone or something inside that room. "Think, think, think!" Jessica's voice drifted through the door, filled with a strange urgency. Amy's breath hitched in her throat. What was she talking about? Who was she speaking to? A knot of terror twisted in her stomach as she realized she had to know what was going on. With trembling hands, Amy pulled out a bobby pin from her hair and fumbled with the lock, her heart pounding as she focused on the task. The minutes felt like hours as she twisted and turned the pin, feeling the mechanism shift beneath her efforts. Finally, with a soft click, the door creaked open, revealing the darkness inside. Amy blinked against the dim light, her pulse racing as she stepped over the threshold, ready to confront whatever lay within. The air was thick with an unsettling energy, and as she took her first step into the room, she felt a chill run down her spine, a premonition of the horror she was about to uncover. As Amy turned the lock on Jessica's door, her heart raced with a mix of anxiety and determination. The click of the latch echoed ominously in the silence of the corridor, and she held her breath for a moment, listening for any sound that might indicate Jessica's return. The air was thick with tension, and Amy's palms were clammy as she pushed the door open slowly, revealing a dimly lit room that felt more like a crypt than a living space. The sight that greeted her was horrifying. The walls were adorned with photos, dozens of them, each showcasing Rachel in various settings, some candid, others staged with an unsettling precision. The images were accompanied by notes, scrawled in an erratic hand, detailing Rachel's daily routines, her favorite spots in the city, and even her personal interactions. It was a chilling tableau, a shrine to obsession that made Amy's stomach churn. "What is this?" she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. She stepped further into the room, drawn by a morbid curiosity despite the overwhelming urge to flee. Among the photographs, she noticed items that belonged to Rachel: an old bracelet, a book with a well-worn spine, and a collection of hair ties. Each piece was like a dagger to her heart, a reminder of her friend's absence. Her fingers brushed against the edge of a framed picture that showed Rachel laughing with friends at a cafe. The note beneath it read, "She always looks happiest here. This is where she belongs." Amy felt bile rise in her throat. The realization struck her like a physical blow. Jessica had been stalking Rachel, meticulously documenting her life. As she sifted through more belongings, Amy's mind raced. How could she have been so blind? The whispers she'd heard at night, the strange behavior, it all painted a terrifying picture. Jessica wasn't just eccentric, she was dangerous. The thought sent a shiver down her spine, and she quickly glanced toward the door, half expecting to see Jessica standing there, eyes wide with fury. "I need to get out of here," she muttered, her voice barely a whisper. But just as she turned to leave, a noise froze her in place. The unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, and Amy's heart dropped into her stomach. Jessica was coming back. Panic surged through her veins. Without thinking, she darted behind the door, her breath quickening as she pressed herself against the cool wall, praying that Jessica wouldn't notice the slightly ajar door. The footsteps grew louder, and Amy could hear Jessica humming softly to herself, a haunting melody that sent chills racing down her spine. "Just a little longer," Jessica sang, her voice sweet yet laced with an unsettling edge. "You'll see, Amy, you'll understand." Amy's mind raced. Understand what? What twisted rationale could possibly justify this madness? She felt the urge to confront Jessica building inside her, but the sheer terror of being discovered stilled her thoughts. The humming continued, and Amy could hear the soft creak of floorboards as Jessica stepped closer. "What are you doing?" Jessica's voice was suddenly sharp, breaking through the melody. "Are you playing games with me, Amy?" Amy's breath hitched in her throat. She wanted to scream, to run, but she remained frozen, her heart pounding in her ears. She could see the shadow of Jessica's figure moving just beyond the door, and the sight made her blood run cold. "I can feel you," Jessica said, a twisted smile creeping onto her lips. "You're always so curious. Curiosity isn't a sin, you know. It leads to discovery." The words sent a jolt of fear through Amy. Discovery? What kind of discovery awaited her? The irony didn't escape her. She had come here seeking the truth, but had instead stumbled into a nightmare. Suddenly, Jessica's voice dipped to a conspiratorial whisper. "I've prepared everything for you, Amy. You'll make the perfect addition." Amy's heart raced as she realized the implication of those words. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in around her as panic threatened to overwhelm her. Her mind screamed for her to make a move, to escape. But the fear of being caught kept her paralyzed behind the door. As Jessica continued to speak, her tone became increasingly erratic, blending excitement with a chilling calmness. "It's like a puzzle, you see. Each piece must fit perfectly, and you, my dear, are the last piece I need." The finality in Jessica's words sent a shiver down Amy's spine, and she knew she had to act fast. The moment of reckoning was drawing near, and she had to find a way out before she became just another item in Jessica's disturbing collection. Amy's heart raced as she quietly slipped out of Jessica's room, her mind a whirlwind of fear and confusion. The dimly lit hallway felt like a labyrinth of shadows, each corner holding the threat of discovery. She pressed her back against the wall, listening intently for any sign of Jessica's return. The air was thick with tension, and the silence was almost deafening. "What am I going to do?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely above a breath. She glanced over her shoulder, half expecting Jessica to appear at any moment, her eyes wild and calculating. Amy's instincts screamed at her to flee, but she was torn. What if she could confront Jessica? If she could expose the truth, perhaps she could save herself and whoever else might be in danger. Taking a deep breath, Amy steeled her resolve and made her way to the living room, where she hoped to find Jessica. The soft glow of the city lights filtered through the large windows, casting eerie shadows across the room. "Jessica," she called out, her voice shaking slightly. "We need to talk." At first, there was silence, but then Amy heard the faint sound of footsteps approaching. Jessica emerged from the hallway, her expression unreadable. "What's wrong, Amy?" she asked, her tone deceptively calm. "You look pale." I just found some things in your room," Amy stammered, trying to keep her voice steady. "Things that don't make sense." "Rachel, she's missing and—" "Missing?" Jessica interrupted, a glint of something unsettling flashing in her eyes. "She's not missing. She's part of the collection now." Amy felt a chill race down her spine. "What do you mean? Jessica, this isn't a joke. You can't just say things like that." Jessica stepped closer, her demeanor shifting. "You don't understand, do you?" she said, her voice dropping to a whisper as if sharing a secret. "I needed her. I need them all. They complete me." "What are you talking about?" Amy backed away, her heart pounding in her chest. "You can't just take people. This is insane." "Insane?" Jessica laughed softly, a haunting sound that echoed off the walls. "No, Amy, this is art. Each person is a unique piece, and together they form something beautiful. I thought you would understand. You're my next piece, after all." Amy's breath caught in her throat. "No, I'm not a part of this. You're sick." "Am I?" Jessica's expression darkened, a flicker of anger crossing her face. "You think you're so different from them? You think I chose them at random? No, I chose them for a reason. And I chose you because you're the final touch I need. You complete the picture." "What picture?" Amy shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. "You're delusional. You think this is some kind of game?" "No game, Amy," Jessica responded, her voice eerily calm again. "It's a necessity. You don't understand the beauty of what I'm creating. Rachel was just the beginning. You'll see once you embrace your role." Amy shook her head vehemently, her mind racing for an escape route. "I won't let you do this to me. I'll call the police. Jessica's expression hardened, and she stepped forward, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "You think they'll believe you? You think anyone will care? You're just a whisper in this city, Amy. But I can make you something more." In that moment, Amy realized the depths of Jessica's madness. There was no reasoning with her. She had crossed a line from which there was no return. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, Amy turned and bolted toward the door, her instincts screaming at her to run. "Where do you think you're going?" Jessica called after her, her voice laced with fury. "I'm getting out of here," Amy shouted back, her heart pounding in her ears. But as she reached for the doorknob, Amy felt a hand grip her shoulder, spinning her around with terrifying force. Jessica's face was inches from hers, her breath hot and frantic. "You can't leave, Amy. You're part of this now. You can't escape what you were meant to be." Panic surged through Amy as she struggled against Jessica's grip, but it was too late. The walls of the apartment seemed to close in around her, trapping her in a nightmare from which there was no awakening. She was caught in the web of Jessica's twisted reality, and the darkness loomed closer, ready to claim her as its own. As Amy stood frozen in the dimly lit hallway outside Jessica's room, the realization that Rachel had been complicit in this horrifying charade crashed over her like a wave of icy water. Every moment spent in their apartment, every shared laugh and secret, felt like a cruel joke now. Her heart raced as she fought to comprehend the sinister web that had ensnared her. "No, it can't be," she whispered to herself, her mind flashing back to Rachel's easy laughter, the way she had brushed off Amy's concerns about Jessica. She wouldn't do that. She couldn't. But the evidence was overwhelming, and the chilling photographs and notes she had seen in Jessica's room haunted her thoughts. Suddenly, the apartment door creaked open and Amy stumbled back, her breath hitching in her throat. Jessica stepped out, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the hallway lights. "What's wrong, Amy?" she asked, feigning innocence, but her eyes glinted with something predatory. I just wanted to talk," Amy stammered, trying to regain her composure. She needed to buy time to think. "About Rachel. Where is she?" A smile curled on Jessica's lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, Rachel is busy. She's always been good at keeping herself occupied." The way she spoke felt like a dagger aimed directly at Amy's heart. "Busy? Doing what?" Amy pressed, her voice trembling. "You know where she is, don't you?" "You both what?" Jessica interrupted, her tone suddenly sharp. "We're friends, Amy. Friends help each other out." She stepped closer, and Amy could smell the faint scent of something sweet, almost sickly. "Help each other out?" Amy echoed, her voice rising. "Is that what you call it? Luring innocent people into your twisted games?" Jessica's smile widened, revealing a hint of madness lurking beneath. "You don't understand, do you? Rachel was special. She was the perfect bait. She helped me collect, and now it's your turn." The realization struck Amy like a bolt of lightning. "You used her. You used us both." Jessica tilted her head, her expression shifting from playful to dangerously serious. "No, Amy, you were always the final piece. Rachel was just a stepping stone. You're the one I've been waiting for." In that moment, fear gripped Amy like a vice. She turned to make a run for it, but Jessica was quicker. "Where do you think you're going?" she hissed, her voice low and threatening. "Let me go!" Amy screamed, desperation flooding her veins. She darted towards the stairs, but Jessica was faster, blocking her path with an unsettling calm. "Why fight it?" Jessica asked, her eyes gleaming with excitement. "This is what you've been drawn to all along. You felt it, didn't you? The thrill of the chase, the danger? You're just like us." "No, I'm nothing like you," Amy shouted, her voice cracking. Every instinct screamed at her to escape, but the reality of her situation felt suffocating. "Oh, but you are," Jessica continued, her voice a chilling whisper. You're my masterpiece, the final brushstroke on a canvas that's been waiting for you." With a swift motion, Jessica lunged for Amy, who barely dodged, her heart pounding louder than ever. She fled towards the living room, but the front door loomed ahead like an unattainable dream. "Help! Someone help me!" Amy cried out, but the echo of her own voice felt hollow in the empty apartment. She could feel the darkness closing in around her, the weight of Jessica's madness pressing down on her. As Amy reached for the door handle, she felt a hand around her wrist. Jessica's grip was unyielding, a vice that threatened to crush her spirit. "You're not leaving," she said, her voice low and sinister. "Not until you understand." Just then, the door swung open, revealing the hallway beyond. Amy's heart raced as she saw a glimpse of freedom, but Jessica's laughter filled the space, a sound so twisted that it sent shivers down her spine. "Don't you get it, Amy?" Jessica sneered. "You're destined to be a part of this. You can't escape your fate." With a final surge of adrenaline, Amy pulled away, breaking free from Jessica's grasp. She bolted towards the door, but in that split second, she felt the world tilt. Jessica had grabbed her again, and this time Amy felt herself being dragged back into the suffocating darkness of the apartment. "No! Let me go!" Amy screamed, but her voice was drowned out by Jessica's chilling laughter. The door slammed shut behind them, sealing Amy's fate in the very place she had once thought of as home. In that moment, she understood the depth of her mistake. Rachel, Jessica, the apartment. It was all part of a horrific cycle that would continue, feeding on the unsuspecting. And as Jessica tightened her grip, Amy realized that she was now just another victim in a game she never wanted to play. Hannah Parker stood in the doorway of what was to be her new home, her heart racing with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. The sun cast a warm glow over the quaint apartment complex, its brick facade adorned with ivy that danced gently in the breeze. It was everything she had dreamed of, an off-campus oasis where she could focus on her studies and enjoy the company of her new roommate, Megan. As she stepped inside, the familiar scent of fresh paint and new furniture enveloped her like a cozy blanket. "Welcome home," Megan chirped, her bright smile radiating enthusiasm. The young woman was perched on the edge of the couch, a magazine spread open on her lap. Her long dark hair framed her face, and her eyes sparkled with a hint of mischief. "I hope you like it. I've made sure to decorate it a little, just to give it some character." Hannah smiled back, her nerves settling as she took in their shared space. The living room was adorned with an eclectic mix of vintage posters, and the walls were splashed with colors that seemed to breathe life into the otherwise mundane setting. "It looks amazing. I love what you've done with the place." "Thanks. I wanted it to feel like home," Megan replied, her enthusiasm infectious. "Let's get your stuff in, and then we can celebrate with some pizza or something." As they unloaded boxes from Hannah's car, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something peculiar about her new roommate. Megan was friendly and accommodating, but there was an air of secrecy that Hannah found unsettling. Perhaps it was the elaborate symbols painted on the walls or the odd trinkets scattered around the apartment. Intricate talismans and strange figurines that seemed to whisper stories of their own. Whenever Hannah inquired about them, Megan would brush it off with a laugh, saying, "Oh, they're just for decoration. You know how it is, just trying to create a vibe." Later that evening, as Hannah settled at the dining table with her textbooks spread around her, she heard a faint sound emanating from the hallway. It was a soft, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat echoing through the walls. She looked up, frowning in confusion. "Megan, what's that noise?" she called out, her voice tinged with concern. Megan appeared from her room, a nervous smile plastered on her face. "Oh, that? It's probably just the pipes. They can be a little noisy, especially at night." She shrugged, her eyes darting away for a moment. "I wouldn't worry about it." Hannah nodded, but her curiosity was piqued. The sound persisted, and as she tried to focus on her studies, it became harder to ignore. She glanced toward the closed door of Megan's room, an insistent tug of intrigue pulling at her. What was behind that door? "Hey, want to take a break and watch a movie?" Megan suggested, her voice brightening. "We can order pizza and binge-watch that new series everyone's talking about." "Sure, that sounds great," Hannah replied, grateful for the distraction. Yet as they settled on the couch, the strange noise continued to echo in the back of her mind, a shadow lurking just beyond her awareness. The night wore on, filled with laughter and the flickering glow of the television screen. But Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. She found herself glancing at Megan, trying to catch her in moments of vulnerability. But her roommate was a master of deflection, always quick to change the subject or redirect the conversation. As the hour grew late and the credits rolled across the screen, Hannah bid Megan goodnight, retreating to her room. Yet sleep eluded her, the unsettling sound continuing to murmur through the walls. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, a sense of unease coiling in her gut. What secrets was Megan hiding behind that locked door? With each passing moment, curiosity gnawed at her. Hannah knew she shouldn't pry, but the need to uncover the truth was intoxicating. She pulled the blanket over her head, wrestling with her thoughts, determined to get some rest. Little did she know that the answers she sought would soon unravel a web of darkness that lay dormant, waiting to awaken. Hannah Parker sat at the small, cluttered desk in her shared living room, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating her face as she tried to concentrate on her studies. The apartment, though charming, felt increasingly oppressive. The strange symbols that adorned the walls, ones she initially thought were quirky decorations, now seemed to watch her with an unsettling intensity. She glanced toward the closed door of Megan's room, a sense of unease creeping over her. That evening, the familiar sound began again, a faint rustling, muffled whispers, mingling with the soft thud of something heavy being moved. Hannah furrowed her brow, the noise pulling her attention away from her textbook. It was becoming a nightly occurrence, and each time it only served to heighten her curiosity and dread. Mustering her courage, she resolved to confront Megan about it. "Megan!" Hannah called out, her voice slightly wavering. She heard a shuffle from behind the door, followed by Megan's voice, light and airy. "Yeah, just a sec." While she waited, Hannah's heart raced, anticipation mingling with anxiety. When Megan finally emerged, her expression was one of feigned innocence, a nervous laugh escaping her lips. "Sorry about the noise. I've just been, doing some late-night rituals for my meditation practice. Helps me focus." "Rituals?" Hannah echoed, her brow arching in skepticism. "Like chanting and stuff?" "Nothing too serious, just some breathing exercises and a bit of sound therapy," Megan replied, waving a hand dismissively as she moved to the kitchen, the bright lights casting long shadows across the floor. "You know, the usual stuff that helps with stress. College is intense, right?" Hannah nodded, though her unease deepened. Something about Megan's demeanor, her overly casual tone, the way her eyes darted briefly to the floor, set off alarm bells in Hannah's mind. "Okay, it sounds a bit different from what I'm used to, I guess." "Don't worry about it, I promise it's all harmless." Megan flashed a reassuring smile, but Hannah couldn't shake the feeling that her roommate was hiding something. As the night wore on, the noises from Megan's room grew louder, strange chants echoing through the walls, punctuated by what sounded like scraping. Each sound gnawed at Hannah's curiosity, compelling her to investigate further. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly 2 a.m. The apartment was steeped in a heavy silence, the kind that envelops you just before a storm. Unable to resist the pull of her curiosity, Hannah tiptoed toward Megan's door, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached for the handle, hesitating for just a moment. What if Megan caught her? The thought sent a shiver down her spine, but the growing sense of dread outweighed her fear. With a deep breath, she pressed her ear against the door, straining to hear. The whispers were clearer now, almost melodic, but laced with an undercurrent of something darker. "Bring forth the shadows. Awaken the ancient ones." Hannah recoiled, her breath hitching in her throat. The chants resonated with an unsettling familiarity, like something out of a horror novel. She stepped back, her mind racing. What was Megan really up to? As she retreated to her own room, Hannah's thoughts spun wildly. She tried to focus on her studies, but the words echoed in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something significant, something that could threaten her very safety. The next morning, Hannah approached Megan over breakfast, attempting to keep her tone casual. "So, about last night, what exactly do you do in there?" Megan paused, her spoon hovering above her cereal. The smile she offered was tight, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "Like I said, just some meditation. You know how it is. Everyone has their ways of coping." "Right," Hannah replied, but doubt hung heavy in the air. "But it sounds a bit intense?" Megan shrugged, her expression unreadable. "It works for me. Anyway, let's not dwell on it. We've got a whole week of finals ahead. We should focus on studying." Hannah nodded, though the conversation left her feeling more unsettled than before. She decided that she needed to learn more about Megan's past, about what lay behind that locked door. The weight of the apartment's secrets pressed down on her, urging her to dig deeper, even if it meant venturing into the unknown. That night, as she lay in bed, she made a promise to herself. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Hannah stood in front of the locked door, her heart pounding in her chest like a frantic drumbeat. The unsettling noises had grown louder over the past few nights, creeping into her dreams and gnawing at her already fragile nerves. She gripped the doorknob, her palms slick with sweat, and took a deep breath. The air around her felt thick, charged with an energy that made her skin prickle. She knew she shouldn't be doing this, violating Megan's privacy, but an insatiable curiosity propelled her forward. With a determined twist, she forced the door open, the creaking hinges sounding like a warning. As the door swung wide, Hannah's breath caught in her throat. The room was dimly lit, the flickering light from a solitary candle casting eerie shadows across the walls. At the center of the room stood an altar, cluttered with dark artifacts that seemed to pulsate with a life of their own. Candles, some burnt down to stubs, surrounded a circle of strange symbols etched into the floor, their meanings lost to her but laden with a sense of foreboding. Her eyes traveled to the walls, where a collection of photographs hung, images of people whose faces were distorted, twisted into expressions of terror and despair. Each picture felt like a window into a nightmare, and Hannah shivered at the thought of what had happened to those individuals. Suddenly, a noise from behind her made her freeze. The unmistakable sound of footsteps echoed through the room. Panic surged through her veins as she darted behind a heavy curtain, heart racing. She held her breath, the world around her fading away as she strained to listen. Megan entered the room, her demeanor drastically altered from the friendly girl Hannah had come to know. Her hair fell in disheveled strands, and her eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. Hannah could barely make out the low murmur of Megan's voice as she began to chant words that felt ancient and foreign, each syllable heavy with significance. "Come forth, Dark Ones," Megan whispered, her voice reverberating in the confined space. "I summon you to hear my plea." Hannah's heart raced, a visceral fear gripping her. What was Megan doing? She had always brushed off the oddities of the apartment as harmless quirks, but now, in the presence of this dark ritual, Hannah felt the weight of her ignorance crash down upon her. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body felt paralyzed, rooted in place by a mixture of fear and fascination. "I offer you this vessel," Megan continued, her voice rising in intensity, "for power and knowledge beyond this realm." Hannah's breath hitched at the word vessel. She felt a cold wave of dread wash over her as she realized that she was the vessel Megan referred to. Was this what those late-night noises were leading to? A dark pact that Hannah had unknowingly become part of. Just then, Hannah's foot slipped on the edge of the curtain, and the fabric rustled. Megan's head whipped around, her eyes narrowing as they locked onto Hannah's hiding place. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice now sharp and commanding. Hannah's pulse quickened, and she fought the urge to bolt. "Megan," she stammered, stepping out from her hiding spot. "What's going on? What are you doing?" Megan's expression shifted, a flicker of surprise crossing her features before it hardened into something colder. "Hannah, you shouldn't have come in here." "I had to know," Hannah replied, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell me? What is all this?" Megan took a step closer, her eyes narrowing, the warmth they once held now replaced by an unsettling chill. "You don't understand. This is bigger than you or me. I need this. I need you." A surge of anger coursed through Hannah. Need me for what? This isn't right, Megan. You're playing with forces you don't understand. Megan's lips curled into a sinister smile. You think you can comprehend what lies beyond? This is my chance to break free from the mundane, Hannah. You were always meant to be part of this. Hannah felt her world tilt, the reality she had known unraveling before her eyes. You can't do this. You can't use me like this. As Megan stepped closer, the atmosphere thickened, shadows creeping across the walls like sentient beings. Hannah realized that whatever Megan was involved in was far darker than she had imagined, and she had stumbled upon a truth that might cost her everything. The walls of the room seemed to close in around her, the air heavy with an impending sense of doom. Hannah stood frozen in place, her heart pounding in her chest as the door creaked open behind her. She had witnessed something that shattered her perception of her roommate, the person she had believed to be a friend. Now, as she peered into the room, the air felt thick with an ominous energy that coiled around her like a serpent. The altar, a grotesque centerpiece, was draped in dark cloth and strewn with objects that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Candles flickered, casting flickering shadows that danced across the walls, transforming the familiar space into a nightmarish tableau. Hannah's breath caught in her throat as she heard footsteps approaching, the sound deliberate and heavy. She ducked behind the doorframe just in time, her pulse echoing in her ears. Megan stepped into the room, her posture rigid, her expression unreadable. The transformation was startling. The warmth that once radiated from her was now replaced with a chilling detachment. Why do you have to be so curious, Hannah? Megan's voice was low, carrying an edge that made Hannah shiver. You should have just stayed away. Hannah's mind raced, each thought sharper than the last. I was just studying, she stammered, trying to sound innocent. But the tremor in her voice betrayed her fear. Studying? Is that what you call it? Megan stepped closer to the altar, her fingers brushing over the trinkets as if they were sacred relics. These are not just decorations. They are part of something much bigger, something you can't possibly understand. What are you doing, Megan? Hannah demanded, her voice rising despite the fear gripping her. This isn't right. You can't just... Megan turned suddenly, her eyes darkening, an unsettling smile creeping onto her lips. Can't just what? Live my life? This is my path, Hannah. You were never meant to be here. You were just a means to an end. What do you mean? Panic surged through Hannah, and she felt the walls of the apartment closing in on her, the shadows growing darker and more oppressive. You don't have to do this. We can find a way to fix it. Megan laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. Fix it? You really think there's a way out of this? The forces I've summoned are beyond your comprehension, and you're already part of the plan. A sinking feeling gripped Hannah's stomach as the reality of her situation began to dawn on her. What plan? Megan, please. But before she could finish, Megan raised her hand, and the room seemed to tremble. You should have stayed curious, Hannah. Curiosity has a price, and you're about to pay it. Hannah's instincts screamed at her to run, but the door felt like a distant memory, the corridor outside an unreachable escape. The shadows flickered, elongating, twisting into shapes that seemed to mock her terror. Megan, don't do this, she cried, her voice cracking. You can still stop. We can get help. Megan's expression hardened, and her voice dropped to a whisper, filled with a sinister calm. Help? There's no help for you here. You're meant to be part of this. You're the offering, the key to unleashing what lies beyond. The weight of Megan's words pressed down on Hannah, making it hard to breathe. She stepped back, her back hitting the cold wall as she struggled to comprehend the magnitude of what she was hearing. You're insane. You can't just... Insane? Megan interrupted, her eyes glinting with an unsettling fervor. You don't understand the power I've tapped into. The entities I've called upon don't care for your definitions of sanity or morality. They only care for the sacrifice that will grant them passage. Hannah felt a cold sweat breaking out across her skin. You're wrong. This isn't power. It's madness. Megan's lips curled into a cruel smile, and she stepped closer, the air around them thickening with a palpable tension. Madness? Perhaps. But it's my madness, and you're the last piece I need to complete the ritual. You should feel honored. Honored? Hannah echoed, feeling the bile rise in her throat. "I won't let you do this." But as she turned to make a break for it, the shadows in the room seemed to writhe, blocking her path. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices urging her to submit, to surrender to the darkness. "Hannah, don't fight it," Megan said, her voice a chilling melody. "Embrace what you are meant to become." Hannah's heart raced as she realized she was trapped, ensnared in a web of darkness spun by someone she once trusted. "No, I won't be your pawn," she screamed, adrenaline surging through her veins, giving her strength. But the apartment felt alive, the very walls pulsing with an energy that sought to envelop her, to pull her deeper into the nightmare that Megan had created. As the shadows closed in, Hannah felt a surge of determination. She wouldn't give in without a fight. But as the darkness surrounded her, she realized that escape was no longer a matter of choice. It was a race against time, against the sinister forces that whispered promises of despair and power. Hannah stumbled back into the dimly lit corridor, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. The air felt thick and heavy, laden with an unseen weight that made it hard to breathe. She glanced back at the door to Megan's room, the symbols etched into the wood seeming to pulse with an otherworldly energy. The reality of what she had just witnessed crashed down on her like a tidal wave. As she turned away, her mind raced with thoughts of escape. "I have to get out of here," she whispered to herself, her voice trembling. Each step she took felt as if she were walking deeper into a nightmare, the walls of the apartment closing in around her. Shadows danced at the edges of her vision, and she could almost hear the whispers of the entities Megan had summoned, taunting her, beckoning her toward an unknown fate. Suddenly, a chilling laugh echoed from behind her. "Trying to run away, Hannah?" Megan's voice slithered through the air, sharp and mocking. Hannah froze, her blood turning to ice. She turned slowly to face her roommate, who now stood at the threshold of her room, illuminated by a flickering candlelight. The once warm and friendly smile had twisted into something sinister, and her eyes sparkled with a manic intensity. "Megan, please," Hannah pleaded, her voice quivering. "You don't have to do this. We can talk about it. Just let me go." Megan stepped forward, her movements graceful yet predatory. "Talk? Oh, sweet Hannah, this is beyond talk. You were never meant to escape. You were brought here for a reason." She gestured dramatically, as if unveiling a grand performance. "Tonight we complete the ritual. You will be my offering to the powers that dwell beyond this realm." Hannah's heart raced as the reality of Megan's words sank in. "Offering? You can't be serious," she gasped, backing away. The shadows seemed to ripple in response to her fear, and she felt the very essence of the apartment shifting around her. "Oh, I am very serious," Megan replied, her voice low and honeyed, dripping with malice. "You see, the energy you brought into this place has awakened them. They crave your essence, Hannah. You are perfect for their needs." "No, I won't let you do this," Hannah shouted, adrenaline fueling her fight-or-flight instincts. She turned to run, searching for any possible escape route. As she sprinted down the hallway, the walls seemed to warp and twist, the familiar apartment transforming into a labyrinth of darkness. "Where do you think you're going?" Megan's voice echoed, now layered with an unsettling chorus of hisses and whispers that made Hannah's skin crawl. "You can't hide from what's already inside you." Hannah's mind raced. She had to find a way to turn this around, to reclaim her power. She skidded to a stop in front of a window, the moonlight barely penetrating the thick, oppressive darkness that enveloped her. "This isn't real," she whispered, trying to convince herself. "I can fight it." Just then, a vision erupted in her mind, a grotesque image of the entities Megan had invoked. They loomed over her, their forms shifting and writhing, faces obscured in shadow. Each one emanated a chilling presence that clawed at her sanity. "You are ours," they seemed to chant, their voices a cacophony of anguish and desire. "No!" Hannah screamed, clenching her fists. "You don't own me!" In that moment, she summoned every ounce of courage, focusing her thoughts on the power of her own will. "I reject you." But the apartment responded violently, the walls shaking as if in protest. A deafening roar filled the air, and Hannah staggered back, fear gripping her heart. Megan stood in the doorway, a dark silhouette against the flickering candles, her expression a twisted blend of joy and desperation. It's too late, Megan said, her voice dripping with triumph. You can't escape what you are. Hannah felt the ground beneath her tremble as shadows coalesced into forms, reaching for her with clawed hands. In that moment, she realized that the very fear she tried to fight had manifested into a dark energy that sought to claim her. Help me, Hannah cried out, desperation clawing at her throat. But the apartment remained silent, the shadows closing in around her, the weight of dread heavier than ever. Hannah stood at the threshold of the locked room, her heart pounding in her chest. The air felt charged with an electric tension, and shadows danced against the walls, mocking her hesitation. She could hear the faint murmurs of the ritual being performed, a low chant that sent shivers down her spine. She had to confront Megan, to put an end to this madness. With a deep breath, she pushed the door open, the creaking sound echoing like a death knell. "Megan!" she shouted, her voice trembling. The flickering candlelight illuminated the room, revealing the altar covered in grotesque symbols and dark artifacts. Megan stood at the center, her back turned to Hannah, her hair falling like a dark veil over her shoulders. "Megan, stop this!" Hannah pleaded, stepping closer despite the primal instinct to flee. "You have to stop. This isn't you." Megan turned slowly, her expression chillingly serene, as if she were no longer the roommate Hannah had known. "You don't understand, Hannah. This is bigger than both of us," she replied, her voice a haunting whisper. "I'm trying to break free from the chains of the past." "What chains? What are you talking about?" Hannah felt a surge of confusion and anger. "You're not making any sense. You're hurting people." Megan's lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. "I was a victim once, just like you. This power, it called to me." She gestured to the altar, where strange, pulsating objects lay scattered among the candles. "It promised me freedom, and I thought I could control it. But now, it's out of my hands." As the chanting grew louder, Hannah felt the room shudder, as if the very walls were alive with the malevolent energy that Megan had awakened. "You have to fight this, Megan. You're not a monster," Hannah cried, desperation clawing at her throat. Megan's eyes darkened, and for a fleeting moment, Hannah saw the girl she had first met, the one who was kind, who laughed easily. "I can't. I made a deal, and now they want you. You're the offering." Hannah's blood ran cold. The realization hit her like a punch to the gut. "You can't do this. We can find another way." But Megan shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "It's too late. I can't escape this fate alone. I thought I could protect you, but I was wrong." The candles flickered violently and shadows twisted in grotesque forms, reaching out as if to claim their next victim. "No, I won't let you take me," Hannah shouted defiantly, lunging toward the altar. She grabbed one of the strange artifacts, an obsidian dagger glinting ominously in the candlelight. "Megan, help me. We can stop this together," she urged, brandishing the dagger in front of her as if it could shield her from the encroaching darkness. But the entities were already rising, their forms shifting and howling in rage. "You think you can disrupt the ritual?" Megan sneered, her voice now a chilling echo of the girl Hannah once knew. "You're only feeding their hunger." Hannah felt the ground tremble beneath her, and the air thickened with the stench of decay. "I won't let you do this," she shouted, raising the dagger. "I'll fight you if I have to." Megan stepped back, her expression a mix of fear and determination. "Then you'll doom us both," she screamed as the shadows surged forward, their claws reaching out for Hannah, eager to pull her into the abyss. "We can't let them win. We have to fight," Hannah yelled, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She lunged toward Megan, hoping to break her from the spell that had ensnared her. But as she did, the dagger slipped from her fingers, clattering to the ground. Time seemed to slow as the entities descended upon them, their wrath palpable. "Hannah!" Megan cried, her voice a blend of horror and realization. "I didn't mean for this to happen." As darkness enveloped them, Hannah's mind raced with chaos and despair. She had come to this apartment filled with dreams and ambitions, and now it was all crumbling around her. She reached for Megan, but it was too late. The shadows swallowed them whole, their screams echoing into a silence that felt eternal. In that moment, Hannah understood the tragic truth. They were both prisoners of their own making, bound by the malevolent forces they had unwittingly unleashed. The hope that had once filled her heart was shattered, leaving only the haunting echoes of dreams unfulfilled, intertwined with a fate that was now sealed in darkness. Jake Miller stepped into his new apartment, the faint smell of fresh paint mingling with the remnants of past tenants. The space was small but cozy, with sunlight streaming through the large windows that overlooked a bustling street. It was the perfect place for a young professional like him, newly relocated and eager to establish a fresh start in the city. He had been searching for a roommate to share the rent, and after several awkward interviews, he had finally found Sarah. Sarah was everything Jake had hoped for in a housemate: friendly, easy to talk to, and they shared a love for classic movies and late-night pizza. As they settled in, Jake felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had envisioned late-night movie marathons and shared meals, and the prospect of living with someone who shared his interests excited him. "Do you want to order some pizza?" Sarah suggested, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "I know this great place that delivers all night." "Sure, I could eat," Jake replied, already reaching for his phone. The connection felt instantaneous, and for the first time since moving, he felt at home. As the evening unfolded, laughter echoed through the apartment, punctuated by the clinking of pizza boxes and the buzz of casual conversation. The warmth of companionship enveloped him, and for a moment, the unease of being in a new city faded away. After finishing their meal, they settled onto the couch, a classic horror movie flickering on the screen. It was later, after the movie ended and Jake had retreated to his room, that he first noticed something peculiar about Sarah. He had been drifting into sleep when a soft sound pulled him back. The rhythmic creaking of the floorboards echoed through the apartment. He glanced at the clock. It was nearly 2 a.m. Curiosity piqued. He got up and peeked into the living room. There was Sarah pacing back and forth, her silhouette moving in the dim light. Her brow was furrowed, and she seemed lost in thought, completely unaware of Jake's presence. He watched her for a moment, unsure if he should say anything. "Hey, everything okay?" he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned, a look of surprise crossing her face. "Oh, Jake, I didn't think you were still awake. I'm fine, just thinking." "Thinking at 2 in the morning?" Jake chuckled awkwardly. "You're quite the night owl." Sarah smiled, brushing her hair back from her face. "Yeah, I guess I am. I often find I'm more productive at night. Sorry if I disturbed you." "Not at all," he replied, forcing a smile. "Just wanted to make sure everything was all right." She nodded, and after a moment returned to her pacing. Jake stood there for a few seconds longer, then retreated to his room, feeling a slight chill in the air. He shook his head, dismissing the oddity as just a quirk of his new roommate. After all, everyone had their habits. As he crawled back into bed, he tried to shake off the unease that had settled in his stomach. Sleep came fitfully, his mind racing with thoughts of the day's events. But as the night deepened, darkness crept into his dreams. It began with a shadow, a dark figure lurking in the corners of his room, watching him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. No matter how he turned, it was always there, a menacing presence that filled him with dread. Each time he awoke, breathless and coated in sweat, he would glance around, half expecting to see Sarah standing at the foot of his bed, her expression unreadable. The dreams continued, each more vivid and harrowing than the last. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He couldn't help but feel a strange connection between Sarah's late-night pacing and the dark figure haunting his dreams. But for now, he chose to ignore it, convincing himself that it was simply the stress of moving and adjusting to a new life. As the first light of dawn broke through the window, Jake lay awake, staring at the ceiling, a nagging sense of unease lingering in the air. Little did he know that this was just the beginning of a journey that would unravel the very fabric of his reality, intertwining his fate with that of his enigmatic roommate, Sarah. Jake stirred awake, his heart racing as he gasped for breath. The remnants of the dream clung to him like a fog, thick and suffocating. He could still see her, Sarah, standing at the foot of his bed, her silhouette dark against the pale moonlight filtering through the window. Her eyes seemed to glimmer with an unsettling intensity, and he could have sworn she whispered his name. Shaking his head, he pushed the covers away and swung his legs over the side of the bed, the cold floor sending shivers up his spine. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second echoing in the silence of the apartment. Jake rubbed his eyes and tried to shake off the remnants of the nightmare. He needed to confront Sarah about what he had seen, or thought he had seen. Maybe it was just his imagination, fueled by the stress of moving and the odd hours she kept. With a deep breath, he stood up, his knees feeling weak beneath him. He padded down the dark hallway, the shadows dancing playfully on the walls as he approached the living room. The soft glow of the television illuminated the space, casting flickering light on the furniture. Sarah sat curled up on the couch, her eyes fixated on the screen. She seemed oblivious to his presence, lost in whatever show was playing. "Sarah?" Jake called, his voice slightly shaky. She turned her head, a bright smile spreading across her face. "Hey, Jake, you're up late. I thought you were asleep." "I was." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I had a strange dream about you. I thought I saw you standing over me." Her expression shifted slightly, concern flickering in her eyes. "Oh, I'm sorry if I startled you. I tend to roam around at night. It's just a habit of mine. You know, night owl and all that." "Right, but it felt real, almost too real." Jake fidgeted, glancing toward the flickering screen. "I just want to make sure everything's okay. You're not doing anything strange, are you?" Sarah laughed lightly, the sound soothing yet somehow disconcerting. "Strange? Me? I promise. I'm just a regular person with an odd sleep schedule. Nothing to worry about." Jake nodded, trying to convince himself. "Okay, just checking. I guess I'm still adjusting to everything. Don't let it get to you. I can be a bit of a night ghost," she teased, her smile widening. "If it bothers you, I'll try to keep it down." "Thanks," he replied, though the unease lingered in his chest. He returned to his room, the weight of her laughter ringing in his ears. As he lay back down, he struggled to reclaim the comfort of sleep, but the shadows in his mind danced restlessly. Hours later, he jolted awake once more to the sound of whispers echoing through the apartment. The air had turned cold, and a chill crept up his spine. He peered into the darkness, straining to hear the hushed voices. They seemed to come from the living room, and an instinctual dread settled in his stomach. A soft breeze swept through his room, making the hairs on his arms stand on end. He fought the urge to call out to Sarah, unsure if he wanted her to confirm his fears or to remain blissfully unaware of the malevolence that seemed to seep into their home. Finally, he mustered the courage to rise once more. He stepped quietly into the living room, his heart pounding in rhythm with the whispers that faded as he entered. The television was off now, the room bathed in an eerie silence. "Sarah?" he called softly, but there was no response. The shadows shifted and the cold air wrapped around him like a vice. He felt a presence lurking just beyond his line of sight, and an overwhelming urge to flee gripped him. Just as he turned to leave, a soft voice broke through the silence. "Jake?" It was Sarah, emerging from the kitchen, a puzzled look on her face. "What are you doing up?" He hesitated, the words caught in his throat. "I thought I heard something. Probably just the old pipes or the wind. This place creaks like it's alive." She laughed, but Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. "Yeah, maybe," he replied, forcing a smile. But even as he spoke, the shadows seemed to gather around them, a dark promise of what was to come. Jake sat on the edge of his bed, his heart racing as he recalled the latest nightmare. It had felt so real, the suffocating darkness closing in around him. And then there was Sarah, her pale figure standing at the foot of his bed, her eyes wide and unblinking. He rubbed his temples, trying to shake off the lingering dread. The apartment felt too quiet, too still, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. As he stepped into the living room, the early morning light barely broke through the heavy curtains, casting long shadows that seemed to creep along the walls. He found Sarah pacing again, her bare feet making soft patters against the hardwood floor. She was muttering to herself, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Sarah?" Jake's voice came out hesitant, as if he was testing the waters of a turbulent sea. She turned abruptly, her expression shifting from deep thought to a bright smile. "Oh, Jake, I didn't see you there. I was just..." Thinking. Thinking? He raised an eyebrow, glancing around at the strange symbols that seemed to flicker in the dim light. You've been doing a lot of that lately. Are you okay? Of course. Just a little restless, you know. She waved her hand dismissively, brushing aside his concern. I've always been a night owl. You should join me sometime. Jake forced a smile, but unease gnawed at him. Maybe I'll pass. I've been having these really vivid dreams, and I could use some sleep. Dreams can be fascinating, she replied, her voice suddenly soft. They reveal so much about us, don't you think? He hesitated, feeling the weight of her gaze. It was as if she was searching for something in his eyes, something profound. Yeah, I guess they do. But mine are different. Dark. Sarah's expression shifted again, a flicker of something, fear, crossing her features before she masked it with a grin. You should write them down. It might help. Jake nodded, but he felt a shiver run down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah was hiding something from him, that her restless pacing and late-night mutterings were more than mere quirks. As the days passed, her behavior grew increasingly erratic. He often caught her talking to herself, lost in conversations with invisible entities. One night, after another sleepless ordeal, Jake decided he needed to confront her again. The air in the apartment felt thick, almost suffocating, and he could feel a cold draft creeping through the space. He found Sarah in the living room, her fingers tracing the strange symbols drawn on the wall with a mix of fascination and fear. What are these? He asked, his voice low and trembling. She jerked back, startled, her eyes wide. Oh, I didn't realize you were there. Jake took a cautious step forward. Sarah, what are you doing? You need to tell me what's going on. There's nothing to worry about, she insisted, her tone turning defensive. These are just thoughts I'm trying to organize. You wouldn't understand. Try me, he urged, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. I'm starting to feel like I'm losing my mind. You're acting strange, and I keep seeing things in my dreams. This isn't just about you anymore. A flicker of something dark crossed her face, and for a moment, Jake thought he saw a shadow pass behind her. You should be careful, Jake. There are things in this world that you can't understand. What do you mean? He pressed, feeling a chill in the air that had nothing to do with the draft. Her eyes searched his, and he felt a strange connection, almost as if they were sharing a moment of silent understanding. Just be aware of your surroundings. Sometimes the things we fear the most are closer than we think. Jake swallowed hard, the growing sense of paranoia tightening around him like a noose. He knew he had to dig deeper, to uncover whatever secrets Sarah was keeping, even if it meant confronting the darkness that seemed to loom over them both. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, determined to find answers. The shadows whispered, and he knew it was only a matter of time before he was pulled into their depths. Jake stood at the threshold of the living room, his heart pounding in his chest. The air around him felt thick, almost suffocating with anticipation, as he prepared to confront Sarah once more. The previous nights had been a blur of unsettling dreams and ghastly whispers, and he could no longer ignore the truth looming over them. With a deep breath, he stepped inside where Sarah was perched on the edge of the couch, her eyes darting to a spot on the wall as if she were listening to a song only she could hear. Sarah, Jake began, his voice a mix of determination and fear. We need to talk. I can't keep pretending everything's normal. She turned to face him, her expression shifting from surprise to a guarded apprehension. Jake, please, not again, I told you. No, you listen to me, he interrupted, his frustration boiling over. You're not just a night owl. Something's wrong, and I need you to be honest with me. You're being hunted, aren't you? The room fell silent. The only sound, the distant hum of the city outside. Sarah's gaze fell to the floor, her fingers nervously twisting a strand of hair. I didn't want you to get involved. I thought I could handle it. What is it? Jake pressed, stepping closer. What's hunting you? She hesitated, the weight of secrets heavy in the air. Finally, she looked up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. It's an ancient entity. It preys on fear and despair, feeding off the darkness in people's hearts. I thought I could escape it, but it's been following me for years. Jake's stomach turned at her admission, the pieces of their situation starting to fit together like a grotesque puzzle. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? We could have faced this together." "I didn't want to put you in danger," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But now it's too late. It senses your fear, Jake. It's growing stronger." "Then we need to figure out how to stop it," he said, his resolve hardening. "There has to be a way." Sarah nodded slowly, her expression shifting from despair to determination. "I've done some research, but I need your help. Together we can find a way to confront it." They moved to the kitchen table, cluttered with books and papers Sarah had gathered. As they pored over the pages, Jake felt a growing sense of unease. The illustrations of the entity, dark, twisted figures with hollow eyes, sent chills down his spine. "What does it want with us?" he asked, trying to suppress the tremor in his voice. "It wants to consume us," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "It thrives on our fear, our pain. I thought I could outrun it, but it always finds me." "Why me?" Jake's voice was barely a whisper. "Why now?" "Because you're connected to me now," she replied, her eyes locking onto his. "You've become a part of this, and it knows that. It's drawn to our shared fear." As they continued to delve into the research, Jake felt a strange sensation wash over him. Visions began flickering in his mind, overlapping with Sarah's memories. He could see shadows creeping along the walls, the oppressive darkness that had haunted her for so long. "I can feel it," he gasped, gripping the edge of the table. "It's trying to break through." "We have to stay focused," Sarah urged, her voice steady despite her fear. "If we can understand its origins, we might find a way to weaken its hold on us." Hours passed as they unearthed fragments of information, piecing together the entity's dark history. "It was once a person," Jake said, his voice trembling. "Someone who was consumed by their own darkness. Now it seeks new victims, feeding off their despair." "Exactly," Sarah confirmed, a spark of hope igniting in her eyes. "If we can confront it with our own strength, we might be able to break its cycle." But as they continued to research, Jake felt the oppressive weight of the entity's presence growing stronger. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to stretch, whispering promises of dread and despair. He glanced at Sarah, her face pale and drawn, and for the first time, he wondered if they were truly prepared for what lay ahead. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "What if it's more powerful than we think?" "We have to try," she replied, her expression resolute. Yet he could see the flicker of fear behind her eyes. "It's the only way to save ourselves." The air around them grew heavier, a tangible darkness seeping into the room as they prepared to face the unknown. Jake felt a chill run down his spine, the entity's presence looming closer, and for the first time, he realized how intertwined their fates had become. Together, they stood on the precipice of something terrifying, knowing that to confront the darkness, they would have to delve deeper into their own fears. And that was a battle neither of them was truly prepared to face. Jake paced the small living room, the air thick with tension and uncertainty. The flickering light of the candles they had lit cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an atmosphere that felt both sacred and foreboding. Sarah was rummaging through a box in the corner, her brow furrowed in concentration. The items they had gathered for the ritual lay scattered on the coffee table: a handful of salt, a small mirror, and a few pieces of black cloth. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He felt the weight of dread settling in his stomach. What if it just makes things worse? Sarah paused, looking up from the box. Her eyes, usually so full of life, now reflected an unsettling mix of fear and determination. "We don't have a choice, Jake. This entity is feeding off our fear. If we don't confront it, we'll both be lost." Jake swallowed hard, trying to steady his racing heart. "I just can't shake the feeling that there's more to your connection with it. You said it's been hunting you, but what if you—" "I didn't summon it on purpose," Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp with frustration. "I didn't even know it existed until it started haunting me. I thought I was just being paranoid, until it got worse." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Jake shifted his gaze to the mirror, its surface tarnished and clouded. He could feel the entity lurking just beyond the fringes of their reality, waiting for the moment they would falter. "What do we need to do?" he finally asked, steeling himself. "We must call it forth," Sarah said, her voice steadying as she began to arrange the items on the table. "The ritual will bind it to the mirror and send it back. But we have to be strong. It'll try to break us." Jake nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. The thought of facing whatever darkness awaited them sent shivers down his spine. He took a deep breath, trying to push his fear aside. "Okay, let's do this." They joined hands, standing across from each other, the dim candlelight flickering around them like a heartbeat. Sarah began to chant, her voice low and rhythmic, weaving words that felt ancient and powerful. Jake felt an odd energy building in the room as he focused on the words, trying to match her cadence. With each repetition, the air grew colder and the shadows deepened. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept through the apartment, extinguishing the candles and plunging them into darkness. Panic surged within Jake, but he squeezed Sarah's hand tighter. "What's happening?" he shouted, his voice echoing in the silence. "Don't stop," Sarah cried, her voice trembling but resolute. "Keep going." Jake's heart raced as he felt a presence swirling around them, heavier than before. He could hear whispers, indistinct but filled with malice, wrapping around him like a shroud. He fought against the rising tide of fear, focusing on Sarah's voice, anchoring himself to her. "Reveal yourself," Sarah commanded, her voice rising above the chaos. "We are not afraid of you." The air thickened, and a figure began to materialize before them, a distorted silhouette shrouded in shadows. Jake's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the shape. Dark, twisted, and menacing. It seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, its presence suffocating. "Sarah!" the entity hissed, its voice a low growl that resonated deep within him. "You cannot escape your past. You called me, and now you must pay." Jake felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. "You don't own her," he shouted, stepping protectively in front of Sarah. "We'll send you back." The entity laughed, a sound that sent chills racing down Jake's spine. "You think you can challenge me? Look at her. She is bound to me whether she knows it or not." As the figure drew closer, Jake caught fleeting glimpses of visions, Sarah's memories, twisted and dark. He saw moments of despair, secrets long buried, and a flicker of something powerful that surged within her. "No!" he shouted, as realization hit him like a wave. "You're lying!" "Am I?" The entity's voice dripped with venom. "She is the key to my freedom. Without her, I am nothing." Jake's grip on Sarah tightened as he felt her trembling beside him. "Sarah, you have to fight it. You are stronger than this." I don't know if I can," she stammered, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't know," Jake replied, desperation filling his voice. "But you can break free. We can do this together." In that moment, the entity lunged, a mass of shadows reaching for them. Jake felt a surge of fear, but it was eclipsed by a fierce determination. "Now," he urged, locking eyes with Sarah. "Together." With a final push, they chanted the closing words of the ritual, pouring every ounce of strength and resolve into their voices. The shadows writhed and screamed as the mirror began to glow, reflecting the light of their combined will. The entity howled, thrashing against the barrier, desperate to escape its impending fate. As the light enveloped them, Jake felt a profound connection with Sarah, a bond forged in the crucible of fear and defiance. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The air in the apartment was thick with tension as Jake and Sarah stood opposite each other in the dim light of their living room, the remnants of their failed ritual lingering around them like a fog. Shadows danced on the walls, flickering in response to the low hum of fear that pulsed between them. Jake's heart raced as he looked at Sarah, her face a blend of determination and despair. "Jake, I need you to listen to me," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor he could sense beneath the surface. "It's not just a monster, it's part of me. I summoned it years ago during a desperate moment. I didn't know what I was doing." Jake's breath hitched. "What do you mean you summoned it? You didn't tell me this. You said you were just being hunted." He stepped back, the weight of her confession pressing down on him like a physical force. "I thought I could handle it. I didn't realize the bond would be so strong that it would feed off my fear and despair." She looked away, tears glistening in her eyes. And now it's feeding off yours too. No. Jake shook his head, the reality of their situation crashing down on him. You can't just give up. We can fight this together. A cold wind swept through the room, sending a shiver down Jake's spine. The lights flickered ominously, and a low growl echoed from the shadows, deep and menacing. The entity was growing stronger, sensing their fear, and Jake could feel its dark influence curling around him like a serpent. "Jake," Sarah said, her voice breaking through the thickening dread. "I can feel it too. It wants us to give in, to let it take us. But I can't let it take you." She stepped closer, her hands trembling as they reached for his. "I can weaken it, but it will cost me." "Cost you what?" Panic surged through him. "No, Sarah, I won't let you do this." "I have to," she said with a fierce resolve. "If I sacrifice myself, it will lose its grip on you. You'll be free. You have to promise me you'll run. You can't stay here. You can't let it trap you like it did me." Jake felt his heart shatter at her words. "I can't lose you. You're my only hope. We're in this together." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "You need to face your fears, Jake. This thing, it thrives on despair. You've been feeding it with your nightmares. You have the strength to fight it. You just have to believe that you can escape." The growl intensified, and shadows writhed on the walls, coiling around them as if trying to drag them into the darkness. Jake could feel the entity's presence, a malevolent force seeking to claim them both. "Please," Sarah pleaded, her voice a whisper. "Trust me. I can do this. I can break the bond, but I need to go into the darkness one last time. I need to confront it, to show it that I'm not afraid anymore." "Sarah, no!" Jake shouted, desperation clawing at his throat. He grabbed her shoulders, searching her eyes for any sign of doubt. "We can find another way. We can figure this out, I swear." But Sarah's resolve was unyielding. "This is the only way, Jake. If I don't do this, it will consume us both. You have to promise me you'll run. You have to live." Jake's world narrowed to the two of them, the shadows swirling around them like a storm. "I promise," he said, his voice breaking. "But I won't forget you. I'll find a way to bring you back. I swear it." With a final lingering look, Sarah turned towards the darkened corner of the room where the entity lurked, its presence thick and oppressive. A pulse of energy surged between them as she stepped forward, her determination shining through the despair. "Stay strong, Jake," she called back to him, her voice steady. "No matter what happens, remember that you're not alone." As she stepped into the darkness, the shadows enveloped her, and the growl morphed into a deafening roar. Jake felt a part of himself fracture, the weight of loss crashing over him like a tidal wave. He stumbled back, the room spinning as he fought against the rising tide of fear. "Sarah!" he shouted, his heart breaking. But it was too late. The entity's power surged, and Jake felt its cold fingers wrap around his throat, threatening to pull him into the abyss alongside her. In that moment, he realized the truth. The entity had been feeding off his fears, his regrets, and now it sought to consume him entirely. He gasped, fighting back against the darkness. "I won't let you take me!" he cried, summoning every ounce of strength he had left. But even as he struggled, the realization settled in. He was forever haunted by the loss of Sarah, trapped in a cycle of despair from which he could never awaken.